Hello, and welcome to this I Got Nothing edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I thought I'd think on my toes and pressure myself for once, and I drew a blank.
Hey, well, you got something with I Got Nothing. That's something.
Well, is that going to have to be the title of the episode now? The I Got Nothing edition?
Well, you know, the way I feel about it, and I said this a couple seconds ago off air, is I don't have a good title because I just feel like we're in such... I've never seen this before from a Vikings team. It's just a weird set of circumstances. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it doesn't seem to be dropping.
Are you telling me you've never seen a 5-game winning streak before? Because we kind of do that a lot.
Yeah, but then I guess I'm just nervously awaiting for the other end of it.
Postcards from the ledge.
There it is. It came in earlier this week than it otherwise would have. But, yeah, I mean, the game last week was great and then kind of scary and then amazing. But first let's introduce who's on the show, since that's my job. We got Mr. Joe Oberle here. He writes for purplePTSD.com and the Sports Post.
How y'all doing?
I've been better.
I got nothing, man. I got nothing. I got to go with that's the theme of the show. I got nothing.
I'm telling you, since Zimmer got here, it's just been a different, you know, the Vikings still are the Vikings, so they force a lot of weird situations on them, but this coaching staff, man, I tell you, they just
Zimmer.
They keep surprising us. Right, Luke?
That's Luke.
Yeah, I got nothing either.
Yeah. So thanks for checking in. We'll see you guys
That's
next
the Purple
week.
Journal podcast. Well, no, I got nothing because I have been taking just haymaker after haymaker in bad cold takes throughout this entire year. Like, I spent the whole offseason bashing Pat Shurmur, and he's doing great.
Yeah.
And I wrote a Keenum hate piece, and he balled out afterwards. And I wrote a Sendejo hate piece, and he balled out afterwards. So, I don't know. Everything I write is wrong, so I got nothing.
So, before we got on air, Luke said he was going to be optimistic this week, so we should almost try to...
I am optimistic.
That scares me.
Me too.
It scares me too. Yeah, it's a horrible idea probably, but I can't help myself.
So this should be the Thanks a Lot Luke edition of the Purple Journal.
No, that'll
podcast.
be next week after it's a loss.
And after you're replaced. Luke writes for the Purple PTSD website, and he's also the co-host of the Pocket Protectors podcast. Somehow he turned into the resident curmudgeon around here, which, as you said off air, someone needs to balance me and Joe out. You know, I feel like I'm kind of in the worst of both worlds. Like, I'm optimistic, but I don't feel good about it. Like, I just feel gross and scared, like going to a middle school dance. So it's I don't get any pleasure out of this.
Well, if you went to a middle school dance, you should probably feel gross.
Well, I'm not allowed anymore, but we're gonna get that law changed when Roy Moore gets in there. And anyway,
oh my God!
Oh boy, we're off to a hot start.
Topical humor.
That's not bad.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm in the middle somewhere because I've seen enough misery, and I'm old enough to be a curmudgeon, and I still have a little purple Kool-Aid in my veins, so I'm somewhere in the middle.
And you're not wrong. I mean, we can't. I mean, I think I've only picked one loss all year, which was the Green Bay game. But you're leading the way in regards to the Vikings winning, so you must be onto something.
Oh, you know,
pick a win every week and have your team be good is a good strategy.
Yes. Well, you know what? I have stopped. I rarely pick against Zimmer's defense. They are so good, and you know, this year they've got a good enough offense that is going to get them past this first half of the schedule, which has not been that difficult. Now it's going to be a little more tougher for me to the second half to keep picking Viking victories, but you know, purple Kool-Aid. What can I say?
Well, on the other side of the ball, too, obviously the big story starting out the week and pretty much every week for the past a million weeks has been the quarterback position, and it was really interesting to sort of watch how the announcers during the Redskins game called it, because they were basically talking up Keenum and saying this is how you answer with Teddy being back, and Keenum shutting down all of his detractors, and then there was 2 passes in a row that were obviously interceptions, and then it basically, in their opinion, kind of nullified all that, and it didn't end up, at least from what Zimmer said, he picked Keenum to be the starter for the Rams game relatively early, but just in general, in regards to Keenum's game on Sunday, how do you think that those interceptions really hurt his cause in that regard?
If I can jump out on this, there are 2 plays, but they really, he demonstrated what he is capable of, and I think Luke has even described him in this way, that you're going to get this stuff with him from time to time, and those 2 passes were both really bad. They were bad. I mean, even to the point where Zimmer had to say they were bad, and he doesn't want to throw anybody under the bus too often. And do I think it takes away from the rest of his game? No, because 4 touchdowns by any consideration is pretty dang good. And I do believe the guy got the offensive player of the week or air player of the week or something.
The FedEx Air, yeah.
Thank you. And this is who he is. You're gonna that decision to throw to Kyle Rudolph still boggles my mind. That was total panic. It's like that's where Teddy learned that from Zimmer. That almost to a fault when we saw him play a couple of years ago, was to throw that thing away if you got nothing. I mean, he might even have been throwing it too soon sometimes, but he needed to throw that one away. The second one, he just telegraphed it, and the guy read it and picked it up. But by their token, he threw some nice passes in there, and that scramble touchdown to Adam Thielen was a bullet into a small window. That was exactly what was needed. It was a play that he made extended with his feet. So I don't think it totally hurts him, but it because I think that's who he is, and we all better know that going in, right? Do you agree, Luke? Or?
Yeah, just a note on the interception that was the first interception. It appeared as though he thought Rudolph was going to be open streaking down the field, because I don't think he saw the safety lurking. And the safety came over and was just waiting for it. But if you remove the safety, that ball was placed as though he was just trying to get it in front of the corner. And then the second one, both of these interceptions could have been solved if he had better velocity, but he'll never have that. But I actually think ESPN's QBR does a great job of summarizing his game, and they gave him like a 99.7, which essentially is saying, yes, those picks happened, but he had done so much leading up to that those picks didn't matter in the game. And I think there's a difference there. Like, yeah, they didn't matter at all in the game, because they didn't. The Redskins got within 8 for like 2 seconds, and by the time they got within 8, the Vikings had gone down and kicked another field goal to.
Right. Yep.
To make it
a 2-score game.
Yeah, to make it a 2-score game. So what Keenum did, and the body of work Keenum put in this game, was enough to win, and enough to win comfortably enough to where those 2 turnovers didn't put the game in that much jeopardy, really. But that said, from a tape perspective, every defensive coordinator that is going up against the Vikings is watching those picks now. And seeing, if he's throwing it out, you can jump that route. And
they have to get rid of that play.
He's not looking off these safeties very much. You can't really get rid of out routes entirely. You just have to.
Yeah, it just seems like earlier in the game, I think in the first quarter there was a similar pass, and my dad looks over and goes, "Man, that's a dangerous throw," because it just takes him so long to get the ball there.
It's just they're just slow. But everybody's looking and saying, "Hey, you can all right, cool. Get aggressive, defensive backs. You can pick these," which is really, really rough. And that is a problem that, as much as the narrative was some weird arm strength thing, Teddy Bridgewater never had that. No. So I still am in favor of starting him. I know he's not going to start, and I don't really need to honk that horn too loud. But on tape, it does matter, and it does have an impact. But it didn't have an impact on the game, so it's hard to be too angry about it. And this was. Even with those interceptions, I kind of feel like saying this was his best game of the year. This was better than the Bucs game, because he was just electric. He was moving in the pocket. He was evading pressure. He was dropping a few and just in the bucket, a few very difficult throws. One of the most difficult being that Thielen touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
The other 3 touchdowns were not very difficult. One was a screen, one was the David Morgan that was like I could have thrown that touchdown, and then the Diggs one he was pretty open too.
He gets a lot of compliments for that. They were saying he dropped a dime into Thielen on that one play, but I thought if he'd have let him even a little further, maybe he's not capable of it, but he leads him in stride, and Thielen might have gone all the way on that, but he had to kind of slow down, and somebody chased him down. You guys know what I'm talking about? That long.
I think I know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the goal line throw.
Right. No, I know you are. I was just talking about another one because people were complimenting him, saying, "Oh, that's a dime." Dropped a dime on him or something. And I thought, boy, I put that out ahead of him, and Thielen is gone. Nobody catches him.
There were a few of that where he didn't quite get him as in stride as you wish he did, but they were accurate enough to take the defensive back out of the play, which is. I'm happy with that every time, even if you don't get quite as much yak as you wish you did. And if he can put that performance up every game, I'm happy. I still worry about how sustainable that level of play is, and I worry that at some point some of those bad interceptable plays are going to happen in a game situation where it's not so far out of hand where they don't matter.
Right. Or it didn't matter.
Yeah, and we'll get into the Redskins game a little bit more because I wanted just to talk about. Well, we'll get into it, but Luke, you wrote an article this week looking at the QB battle from a different perspective. If you kind of want to explain it, since you can obviously explain it way better than I'm going to be able to.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about economics in football because I find it to just be like a very interesting practice. Is applying those kind of logical theories to a sport is just fascinating to me. And I did the Infinite Monkeys podcast over the off season that talked a lot about that stuff. So this is about game theory, which I've written about and I believe recorded an Infinite Monkeys about, if I remember. Yeah. And just kind of using that logic. The kicker of game theory and where it's relevant here is the answer to the quote-unquote prisoner's dilemma, which is like the common example, has nothing to do with like the nebulous concept that you're usually trying to evaluate. So with Case Keenum and Teddy Bridgewater, the way I laid it out, it actually has nothing to do with whether or not Bridgewater is good because it with whether or not he's good, because regardless of whether or not he's good, it offers you more value. So if he's good, obviously it's better to start him, and if he isn't good, it's better to find that out, I guess is ultimately the logic there. And there's a lot more that goes into it, and you should read that article.
Dependent on what outcome? Like this season, or like the team as a whole, or both?
Well, it's good to get your long-term, it's good to get an idea of him, in the context of the long term. And it's also good to start trying to get him in as early as possible because there is a level of if you believe that there's going to be a level of rust that needs to be knocked off.
Yeah.
I would rather be doing that now than be doing that in week 17 and possibly still have the quote-unquote rust being knocked off when we start looking at the playoffs.
Yeah.
So the more games you don't have him in, the more that he's still going to be kind of like warming back up, I guess. Unless your plan is to take Case Keenum entirely into the playoffs, which, for the reasons I just talked about, I don't really trust.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I know Joe wants to chime in on this, so I'll just say this real quickly, but there's obviously a strong contingent of Vikings fans who are really pro Case Keenum, and has been playing well. I thought it was funny that I was arguing with a guy online a week or two ago who was saying that Keenum's the best quarterback that we've had since Favre, and I was like, that's not true. And then he went out there and had a game that they were like, well, this is the best the Vikings have had since Brett Favre in 2009. I'm like, damn it. But I don't think any of those people actually think that Case Keenum's going to be the starter in 2 or 3 years. You know what I mean? Like,
no, nobody really does.
So,
although he's going to be a starter somewhere. He's going to get paid. Arif just wrote a great article.
He's going to be like the new Matt Castle.
Yeah, he's going to do that for somebody who drafts like Baker Mayfield, and then he's going to start the first 4 games and then until the rookie is ready, and he's going to get paid like $15 million to do it, and it's going to be a great deal for him.
So my point was that they do have to eventually get Teddy back out there, and my biggest fear is the rust thing, and when he's going to be able to come back, and this is a harder stretch of schedule, so it's just a really bad time for Teddy to have come back, even though that's not anything you can control. So there's just a ton of variables there, but at the end of the day, it's Teddy's team, and I think that was made clear this week. I don't know if the team said that or if that's just something that was leaked, but they basically said, Teddy's the franchise, so he's eventually going to start. I think that was even stated on TV last week. So, yeah, how long do you stick with the hot hand, and then, like Joe's going to talk about, what happens if you put Teddy in and he doesn't play well? So, it's just...
Yeah, one factor that does make the switch easier is both Case Keenum and Teddy Bridgewater are similar styles of quarterback.
Yeah.
And their skill sets are pretty similar. I've actually kind of thought the whole time I've been watching Cases as what I remember of Teddy Bridgewater, but like 70% of him, like a Teddy Bridgewater light.
I just have a couple questions.
Yeah.
Let me get this straight here. Economics, logic, and analytics. Who is this guy, and how did he get on this podcast? Okay.
Just trying to be smart.
I had to get that out there. When I read the story, I really liked it, and I partially because when it comes to analytic type things, right? I know this is live something. I was able to understand it, so that's one reason why I wrote it. And my head has been elsewhere since, so I'm not sure exactly where it's at. But it was the idea of you had this little, I don't know what you call those things, a graphic where you start a Case, a good Teddy, bad Teddy, and Case's ceiling, and I you bring up the Bradford situation where you started a bad Bradford, but the Vikings got the hook on him and got him out of there in time for Case to come in and still win the game. So I think as a result of that, it was a worse team that you're playing that week than you would be this week, but you come out of there with minimal damage. Say you started bad Teddy and he's bad Teddy, and you don't hook him in time because, as this one guy wrote on another site, the Rams are going to start out with a 14-point lead in the first quarter. But if you don't hook him in time and the Vikings lose that game, then I think you have that kind of has a domino effect where then Case is bitter because he didn't get the start, and the team's bitter because he didn't get the loss, and they're mad at the coaches, and that goes it dominoes into a short week against Detroit, and they lose that game, and you're talking about then you don't but if you start Case Keenum, you get that ceiling, whatever that is, and that's what I was kind of advocating, and I know in a response I put, I know that Luke wants to respond to that as well, so if that makes sense.
That's a really good point. And from a team morale standpoint, I totally get it, right? Because, it kind of sends a message to all the other players, what do you have to do to win a job? So I totally get that. I think the consequences of, and if you lose this game and you're hit it into a short week, then the same consequences exist if Case Keenum loses you this game, which it's, people are, acting like it's some given that Case Keenum, if you just play him, he'll just keep winning. That's not the case.
That's true. That's true.
And I think the biggest thing I have to say about it is I don't want to make one decision in anticipation of another decision, if that makes sense. If you're gonna start Teddy, that's one decision, and then hooking him later is another decision. And if you make a bad decision in the second time, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should try to change what your decision is the first time to try and prevent that. Right. I don't want to make a certain decision to prevent myself from making a bad decision later. I think there's kind of two ways that quote unquote bad Teddy can go, right? He's either so bad it's like Bradford and you absolutely know he's not going to be able to, pull together and win a game. You can put Case Keenum in and it'll be a similar situation to that. But if it is a situation where it's difficult and the coaches can't just be oh shoot, he's totally not ready and hook him just like they did with Bradford, which by the way, I kind of don't subscribe to the thought that Case Keenum can't handle a benching. He handled one earlier this year and he's handled 6 throughout his career. But if it is close enough where it's a difficult decision, one that's difficult enough for the coaches to be able to get wrong, then doesn't that kind of mean that both quarterbacks are playing at a similar level? If you aren't sure that Case Keenum is going to give you better play than you're getting, right now with hypothetical Teddy Bridgewater, doesn't that mean that they're very close? And then you can expect Teddy Bridgewater to improve week over week as he gets more into the rhythm of games. So if they're close to start out and it's a hard decision, that means that long term you have a lot more equity to go forward.
Mm-hmm. And those are all good points. I guess I thought when I look at it objectively, I still came away saying, and I still contend that either scenario is good. I did not want to advocate starting Teddy. I wanted him to come in at the end of some game knock his rust off there. And I said, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I ultimately thought that's what the coaching staff would do, because they already tried this experiment starting this guy once where they're not sure, who's such an unknown, and then it backfired on them completely, almost to the point where they lost the game. They didn't, but whatever. I don't think that the coaching staff wants to make that mistake again. And so I'm thinking they're going to start Keenum and then bring in Teddy off the bench at some point when a game, they could have done it last week, because if he doesn't throw those interceptions, and they go down to the fourth.
Yeah, they were close.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, so I mean, that's what I would like to see then, because I know they got at some point to see what they got in him. And I would like to see if he can protect himself. That's the most important thing. Can he protect himself out there against live action? And can he plan on his leg, or is he going to be gun shy or what have you? So I just don't know that you answer those questions by starting the guy, but that's my opinion. And
yeah, at this point, he's been on the practice field, for a few weeks. He's completely off the injury report, so you can kind of construe out of that his knee is as healthy as it's going to be until it gets into a game situation. So if Teddy Bridgewater does start and then falter, whenever that happens to be, it is going to be because of something that didn't show up on the practice field, or it is going to be because of a catastrophic mis-scouting on the coach's part, which I'm just going to kind of rule out as a possibility, because, they had 3 weeks. They probably aren't just, ignoring things. And if there is something wrong, and there's a lot of fear over, hey, what if he gets up to game speed and he's not, and something goes wrong that we didn't see on the practice field, if there is that fear, for one, it's not a guarantee that that's going to happen. And I think people are saying, as soon as he gets in there, he's going to be rusty and he's going to be, not able to handle pressure, and he's going to be able to not handle, game speed. And that's not a guarantee, and people are kind of treating it like one. Yeah. So I think at some point, pull the Band-Aid off. And if he's now no longer able to handle pressure, which would be very bizarre because it was the single thing that he was best at throughout all of his entire career, college and pros and everything. But if that is true, don't you want to know that? And don't you want to know that sooner rather than later?
Yeah.
I don't want to find that out in week 15.
Especially Joe, with the contract thing, too.
Joe, are you happy with the decision they made?
Yeah, just because I don't, and I've made this painfully clear for a while, I don't think Teddy has ever played as well as Keenum has been playing, or at least played against the Redskins. And I know that he was cut down as he was ascending, and his preseason, even though it was preseason, he looked like he was making throws that I hadn't seen him make in a game situation before. I just fear that you take a year and a half of rust, plus the fact that, in a Redskins game where basically if Keenum didn't play perfectly, the Vikings not perfectly, but mostly perfect up until those interceptions, the Vikings may not have won that game just because of how the Redskins were moving the ball. Just that there's going to be some sort of regression there, and I don't know if this team can, at this point in the schedule, do that. And I guess we'll see on Sunday how they bounce back defensively against the Rams. But yeah, my biggest point is I don't think I've ever seen Teddy play the first 3 quarters of that game on Sunday, or in stretches thus far this season.
Yeah, I think as a coach, if you're looking at Case Keenum and you're saying, okay, I think this guy is going to play as well as he played in that Redskins game down the stretch, of course you don't bench that. I think the point that we have to be realistic about is he really going to put that together every game? No way.
Yeah, and it's rough for Keenum because that is the underlying argument. We're just going to keep giving it to Keenum until he plays bad enough for us to make the switch.
Yeah, it's such an outlier in the context of his career. I mean, it's not like he's some rookie that we're just now seeing. He's been in the league for 5 years? He's never been this guy before, and it's naive to me to think that at some point the clock isn't going to strike midnight.
Yeah,
and he's going against a pretty tough defense this week, so we'll see a lot more from him.
Yeah, and it was amazing that going into the Redskins game they had just shut down the Seahawks, who obviously have some offensive line issues and offensive issues in general. But to see the offense, as the quote was 1,000 times Sunday, run a clinic on that defense was something I guess I didn't expect. Obviously, since I lowballed the prediction score. Unfortunately,
Josh Norman got embarrassed frequently, and it was beautiful.
Wasn't it? That was the highlight of the
day. He's so good.
Why was that happening?
Because the two players across from him are better than him.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And that's not a knock on Josh Norman. He's a very good cornerback, but Diggs and Thielen are both elite players, and they just outclassed him.
Yeah, especially with Thielen's catch radius, he's almost uncoverable at this point. You just throw it down by someone's ankles, he'll do a side flip and catch it. But when it came to the offense,
Right,
we touched on this. I did feel like the first interception was more of Keenum getting like a little bit of Brett Favre in him, and he was throwing off his back foot and was just, I think he was too cocky at that point because everything he threw was basically a chunk yardage pickup. And I alluded to this, but with the defense giving up that many points, I just wanted your guys' thoughts on the day that the defense had, because typically you would think that with the offense moving the ball like that, scoring that many points, that the game would have been over, and that would have been a perfect situation for Teddy to come back. But this is kind of a two-parter since obviously Everson Griffin didn't play, and I wanted to know what you guys thought about how much his absence affected the way the defense played, even though I think Robeson had a decent day. He had a couple of nice tackles. I love that dude.
Yeah, he had a good day against the right tackle. But we definitely missed Griffin.
Yep.
Griffin frequently absorbs chips and double teams, which means, I think Vernon Davis had like 7 catches for like 75 yards or some really good stat line for a tight end.
Yeah.
And on a lot of those plays, if Griffin is in, Vernon Davis might be chipping Everson Griffin instead of running those routes. So that has an impact, and it also means that if they're not doubling Griffin, that means that they can spend their time doubling Linval Joseph. And if they're not chipping Griffin, that means that they can chip Danielle Hunter instead. So all of their production, like everybody's job gets harder when you don't have Everson Griffin, and we really felt that. And it's all compounded by the fact that the Redskins just have a very good offensive roster. That's a lot of good linemen up there. So the defensive line had trouble because they're going up against good players. And they have, even though their weapons are a little depleted, I thought their wide receivers were playing excellently all game. And Kirk Cousins kind of proved that even though he wasn't quite enough down the stretch to pull that game out, he proved that he's a good quarterback. And so good quarterback, good line, good receivers, their passing game is going to move even if you're going up against a good defense. So credit to the Redskins.
I agree. I thought they had they definitely missed Griffin. I thought, like you said, Joe, that Robeson, I thought he stepped up and made a few big plays that, I didn't know that he still had in him. So it was really nice to see. And it was really good to have Zendejo back. He made a couple big plays where, he knocked a couple passes out of the clutches of one of the receivers, and one of them was in the end zone, not the second one.
He did both. He knocked 2 passes away in the end zone, yeah. And
that was nice. It's unfortunate that he's on the injured list and still hasn't practiced this week yet, but it's because it was, it's fun, really weird to be talking about him when we used to, not too long ago, just wondering who was going to beat him out, but now, you're hoping that he's back on the field, but, it looks right that it was a good team, and that's the way it's going to be the rest of the way. Perhaps, the Vikings are giving up 18.3 points a game on defense as a team, and that's going to start changing. It did last Sunday, and now you're going against the best defense or offense in the league point wise this week. They're going to start having to step up their game a little bit, and I just don't think we were used to seeing that. So it was kind of shocking at the end that the other team put up those points, but they're a good team and they're a good offensive team anyway. So
you guys think that it's not specifically always going to be a plus 30-point game, but do you think that's more of the realm of what's going to be the new norm after the bye?
I don't think so. I don't think it'll be that bad.
You trying to get some hints for the prediction segment? What's the deal?
I need all the help I can get.
No, I think Everson Griffin coming back is going to be a big deal. The Redskins have a good roster, and that contributed to it as well. But the defense also had kind of seemingly pulled it together before those interceptions kind of let him back in the game.
He sure did.
And we wouldn't even be talking about it. So, if that pick didn't happen and you didn't have I believe it was 8 points at the end, right? Because they did a 2-point conversion, or was it just the touchdown?
It was just the touchdown that they did the world's worst onside kick.
Right. Yes. So if you take away that touchdown and it's only a 23-point game, and that touchdown wasn't on the defense at all, I don't think we're having this conversation.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, and you can't keep throwing the defense back out there. They're going to get fatigued when all of a sudden you get offense goes out there and throws a couple picks on 2 consecutive plays by an offense, or that's tough on a defense. They're going to be fatigued. They're going to give up points to a good offense. So.
Yeah, and they did make the first one irrelevant. I believe they forced a 3-and-out after that.
Yes, yeah.
And real quick, I'm a big Trey Waynes guy. I just wanted to point out the touchdown that was thrown against him was one of the nicest catches I've seen all season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No reasonable person can watch that and put any blame on Trey Waynes. That was just an incredible play.
Yep, that was good coverage. Yeah.
That dude, the practice squad guy, man, he had
a circus catch.
Day.
Unbelievable play.
When you get Trey on the show, Joe, you just love him.
Yeah, let's get Trey Waynes on the show.
That's not
That'd
a bad
great.
idea. I think once his restraining order against me lapses, we can go for it.
I will say he has pulled it together over the last 5 games. I think he ranks more in the middle of the pack versus in the bottom 10, which as a CB2, if you have a middle of the pack and a Xavier Rhodes, you're in a great spot.
He's got plays like that have happened to us. He'll have a good game, and then have one bad play that just sticks out like a sore thumb. But I totally agree with you, Joe. I thought he had good coverage, and the guy makes an all-world, freakazoid catch. What can you do? I mean, he could have done that against Rhodes the same way. So.
And
Ben Gedeon, I do want to mention while we're on the defense. Ben Gedeon has had quietly second on the team in run stops, which is a lot better of a measure than tackles because it's tackles that kept the offense behind schedule. And Linval Joseph is first and Ben Gedeon is second, and he has a very good run stop rate for a linebacker. So he's quietly had a season as a productive contributor, but none of them have been particularly flashy. Nobody puts a highlight reel play. ESPN's not going to show a 1-yard run ever, but he does cause that a lot, and it's he's been a contributor when teams are coming out in bigger sets and putting us in our base defense, which is a huge upgrade because we lost games for that reason when they could run right at Chad Greenway.
Way to go, Rick Spielman.
Yeah, that 4th-round pick nobody liked.
I saw a Power Rankings article this week that was a national writer, and the headline was about the Vikings are the biggest surprise in the NFL this season. And I figured they'd have them rated like first or top 4, but they were ranked 8th, and it was talking about the draft that we had this year, or basically how the Vikings have succeeded despite 2 back-to-back bad drafts with the Laquan Treadwell draft, and then this year saying that Cook is out, and the only other person they have contributing is Elflein, and it's like, well,
what?
Yeah,
that doesn't seem right. So
and we didn't have a first rounder, so I guess saying that it's not an impactful draft is, I guess, fair. Even if you do count Gedeon, because you have your 3rd rounder and your 4th rounder. But it was clearly a well-managed draft, and they
got a backup guard who stepped in. I can't even think of say his name, but the backup.
Isadora. Yeah.
I mean that's it's been a decent draft. It really has been. I mean, and you can't even count Cook against them. I mean, how is he saying that's bad because the guy's out? They should have done an MRI of his knees and to see if they're susceptible to the ACL tearing.
Crystal ball.
Jeez.
Well, speaking of a horrible draft, managing a horrible draft, I mentioned this in an email, but I forgot to put it on the agenda. There's been some talk about Zimmer being one of the league candidates for Coach of the Year, which he was, I think, at this point last season as well, at least during the bye. And I think, if I remember correctly, the 2 candidates are him and then the Rams coach, basically. So I think this weekend will be a good barometer in regards to that. But
it'll be interesting to watch because Sean McVay used to be, he was with Washington last year and kind of off the Gruden tree, and that's how he got his, he was the offensive coordinator there, and so he's going to be calling plays against Zimmer on Sunday, and so I think it'll be a nice, interesting thing. And if any of this means anything, that the Vikings defense did play, good enough against the Washington Gruden offense this week. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch and see what goes on between them.
I'm really excited for this coaching matchup. On both sides of the ball, because Shermer's been coaching out of his skull, and he gets to go up against Wade Phillips.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you have McVay versus Zimmer is marquee, so it's going to be a really interesting game of like a chess match game. I think
I was just going to put in there real quick in regards to Wade Phillips. I think that the Rams haven't given up more than 17 points since October 1st or something. So something like that. They've been blowing out the Giants and the hapless Texans though, so that's something to be taken with a grain of salt.
Five of their wins are against teams without winning records. The Niners, the Colts, the Giants, the Texans, and I can't remember the other one.
Yeah, and we have a similar trend with the Rodgerless Packers, the Browns, the Ravens, a bunch of stinker teams. There's a lot of stinker teams in the league. I think if you were to take the Rams roster and just add it all up and take our roster and add it all up, I would argue that the Rams have more better players, but the way that they approach games really plays into our strengths in a way that I feel pretty good about this game. They do a lot of screens, and the Vikings have been excellent against screens. Anthony Barr has been a monster against it, and Eric Kendricks has been a monster against screens.
Trey Wayne's open field tackling.
They have a lot of very good route concepts that take a long time, and they kind of invite you to blitz so that they can get you with screens. But if the Vikings can do double A gap looks and then back off them, they can kind of confuse that strategy. And one thing that Jared Goff has done is very similar to actually what Shermer's done with Case Keenum, in that McVay has made it easier on Goff by putting all of the reading of the field pre-snap and basically saying, okay, all the decisions you're going to have to make are pre-snap. And it gives him time to kind of, get under center, look at it, survey the field, make a decision. Case Keenum has had a similar offense where he gets to, put someone in motion, determine man or zone, and then make an audible if appropriate. Jared Goff has similar responsibilities. And then post-snap, he doesn't have to do much reading. Where that falters is when you run into a defense like Zimmer's that's really good at disguising itself, and you can roll safeties and have double A gap looks where both linebackers back off into coverage. It'll force Jared Goff to make quick throws or make quick reads, and he hasn't really been tested in that way, so it'll be really interesting to see if he's able to handle that challenge. And I also think that if the screen game can be stymied, or if the Vikings defense can get pressure on them, which they have a couple of suspect offensive linemen, mostly on the right side, so Daniil Hunter is going to have to step up in a big way. But if they can get pressure with 4 without committing to blitzes that can then be, victimized by screens, then you can get a young quarterback who isn't used to reading post-snap under pressure, and that's when really, really bad things happen.
Absolutely. They got Whitworth over on the left, who's only had one.
Yeah, Whitworth versus Griffin is going to be so good. I'm so excited.
I watched the Rams play last week, and he is, he started partially through the season last year, so he is still kind of a rookie, but he's not. He's a second year.
He just played his 16th game.
Right. So I saw him make a few, poor decisions. Not a lot, but he's decent. He's having a great season. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but with the Vikings and Zimmer's defense and design for the masking coverages and really trying to confuse a quarterback, a quarterback that's even been in the league that works well in that. Here you got some guy who's still a little bit green, yet I'm thinking they can make some hay there and make it difficult for him, and that will really play into this game quite heavily.
And you'd think that Keenum would want to light up the Rams too.
Case Keenum revenge game, baby.
Yeah, so that.
Oh, it's none of the same Rams. It's no Jeff Fisher, no Greg Williams. He already beat Greg Williams.
He poo-pooed all that, of course, on Wednesday when he was talking to the media, and he came out. His first thing he talked about was his high school apparently is in the state finals. He said, yeah, I figured you guys wanted to hear a little bit about my old team, and so he started. It was pretty funny. So, but it's he says he's got friends there. He's it's interesting. They asked him about Goff. He says, "How's your relationship with him?" He goes, "There's a pause." He goes, "He's a good guy. He's a good guy." And they are, I think, friends, but it was probably difficult to be benched for him last year, and I'm sure he wants to win, but he says it's just I'm treating him just like any other game, which is what they all say. So But
well, the impression I got from All or Nothing between those two was it seemed like they were both amicable enough, but Goff was just so overwhelmed by being in the NFL and the speed of the game and all of the input that he was getting, being a number one overall. He just seemed so overwhelmed and out of it all the time. I imagine he probably wasn't the most sociable guy. So while they aren't like enemies or anything, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that they never really got that close.
Yeah, Case Scott has a little bit of an edge to him. I mean, if you stack him up next to the other two quarterbacks in that locker room, you got Sam, who's a nice guy and doesn't really say so much, and you got Teddy, who everybody says is St. Teresa in a purple uniform. Not St. Teresa. Who's the mother from Calcutta? I don't know what the heck her name is. Anyway,
Mother Teresa.
Mother Teresa, thank you. Who's now a saint. And Case is he likes he's got a little edge where he'll you ask him for the 14th time if you're preparing a start, and I wanted to do it. I didn't do it on Wednesday. I thought after they announced it just before his press conference started, and I just wanted to say, so are you preparing to be the starter now that you've been named starter? And I should have, I didn't, but because he was getting so sick of saying, I tell you this every week, guys, I prepared as I'm going to start, I'm prepared as I'm going to play, blah 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 blah. There's just this little edge to him, and I think that's a good thing to have, especially at that position.
For sure. And what did you guys think on the off? You guys kind of touched on this a little bit, but from a keys to the game perspective, offensively, what do you think this team needs to do to take advantage of that defense that hasn't been giving up a lot of points? I'm going to break some news here and say that I think the Vikings should score like 14 points in the first quarter and then just keep scoring.
Just try, good Joe.
I need a link to that piece that made everybody so mad.
Score, then keep scoring, and then throw the ball through the air, and then catch it.
If they have a 3-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter, it's going to make them have to really press to get back into it.
I love it.
That's the key. Well, the Vikings had that going last week, and almost in the fourth quarter.
That last-minute eke-out win? It's my new favorite writer.
Oh, God.
I will say that on the defensive side of the ball, the Rams do have one huge liability in Tremaine Johnson, and they also might lose LaMarcus Joyner, who's their best defensive back right now. He's having a really good year, and he was a DNP both yesterday, Wednesday, and today, Thursday. If the secondary is depleted like that, that means that you can really just have your way with them and just like kind of go deep, and you might see a similar game plan to what you saw in the Redskins game with a lot of deep shots or intermediate shots
against Josh Norman. So you're saying they can do this against a weaker secondary?
Absolutely. I mean, Tremaine Johnson is currently worse than Trey Waynes was at any point this season. He's if Trey Waynes, I talked a lot about how he was ranking like, 9th worst or 8th worst, and Tremaine Johnson was always above him on those lists. They also have a struggling linebacker in Alec Ogletree and might lose their good linebacker in Mark Barron. In Connor Barwin, who's an outside linebacker. So, and they've given up a lot of run yards to zone schemes, especially on the interior, which is odd because of Aaron Donald, but kind of the whole point of a zone scheme is that you can neutralize superstars like that by just like scheming away from them or using trap plays to take them out of the play or something like that, where it doesn't matter how good they are, they kind of are just washed out of the play no matter, like there's no way around it, and you just kind of target that player and take him out of the play. And so I think you can run on them. I want to see Jerick McKinnon more in this game. Latavius Murray is not very good at forcing missed tackles, and the Rams are very bad at tackling. So I want to see Jerick McKinnon take advantage of their poor tackling technique and get a little bit more run this game. And on the passing side, I think Diggs and Thielen can absolutely torch the secondary, even though they do have a couple of decent players across the field from Tremaine Johnson. And if LaMarcus Joyner doesn't go, whoever that backup is, I think that these guys, especially if you can get Thielen lined up in the slot against Nickel Roby-Coleman, who I wanted a lot in the offseason, and he's had an okay year, but he's like short, and it'll be the same thing as Josh Norman. Thielen has like 4 inches on him and can just go up and get it.
What do you think, Joe?
14 points, baby. They've got to. do what they've done so many times is, they got to stop Gurley first, and that's really important this time, because if he gets going, then that opens it up for Jared Goff to run around and do his thing. So I think that it's going to be paramount to stopping the run. I know it's cliche and they say it every week and I shouldn't be repeating it, but it's true. That's what they do, and that's what they'll tell you they do. They'll do that first, and I think they can. As far as scoring on the Rams defense, they're a good defense. Like I said, they've benefited from a weaker schedule, so maybe that's why they're not giving up so many points. But I think the running game is huge for the Vikings. They have to, they've got to establish it. And once you do that, then it takes pressure off the rest of them. That's a good thought, Luke, about getting McKinnon in there. He wasn't the main guy last week, and I just don't know what their rhyme or reason is for the way they switch it around. But so far they've been really successful in who they feature at running back. But change it up and keep that defense off balance, and I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, with Gurley, the screen game, they've been using the screen game a lot in him, and I think the worst thing that can happen to us with Gurley is Eric Kendricks having a bad day tackling. He's been a pretty inconsistent tackler all year, and if Gurley can make him miss, he can really wreak a lot of havoc. So it'll be very important to be sound tacklers against Todd Gurley.
He's got three receiving touchdowns. He's tied for the most rushing touchdowns in the league, and he's also got 3 grad subs.
He's versatile.
Yeah, he's a good player.
This team's so fun. I love the Rams. They're a lot of fun.
I was going to say, for those that don't know, Luke lives in Los Angeles, so he might be slowly but surely turning to the dark side.
I'm not. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're in Los Angeles. They're putting together a lot of fun tape to watch. So,
are people starting to turn to them now down there a little bit more since they're doing so well? As much football stuff as you see, it's mostly Rams stuff. I saw one Chargers hat the other day. It was the first one I'd seen since they moved here a year ago.
God, it just has to be an untenable situation for not the the Rams are doing well, but the Chargers are having a decent season.
Nobody here wanted them.
And I know
we were like, why?
God, dang, it just blows me away what the NFL has done there by.
They have no city. They're the nowhere Chargers.
Yeah, they should have moved the Raiders
to Bakersfield, California.
They should have moved the Raiders back to LA and then moved the Chargers to Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm so against this team. Like, if I was president, that'd be my whole platform. Not allowing teams to move, or at least not allowing team names to move.
They're preoccupied with ousting Jerry Jones.
Yeah. World's falling apart around him. So who won predictions last week? Joe did again, since he has
yes, but not by much. You guys were only within 4 points of each other.
Yeah, I picked up points.
You picked up 4, so it's a 33-point deficit right now. Still a game. It's a solid lead. You got some work to do, Joe Johnson, but
I got something.
I thought you had nothing.
I've evolved.
Okay.
So, you went first last week, and I know the rule is that the winner goes first, but I'll just go first since I already know.
You already know what I put online for my prediction? Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't have a good feeling about this game, even though I didn't have one last week. I don't know. I'm really, and this is not the best thing you want to hear from someone that does any level of analysis of football, even on the level that I do it. But I just can't picture this team being 8-2 for some reason. And I think the Rams are a good team. Obviously, they're pretty stacked all around. So I just have a feeling that it's the up and down Case Keenum show, and that, based on the way that he ended the game last week, that could carry over to this week, or just in general, that's how he plays, so they might take advantage of that. I think the score will be nothing ridiculous, but it won't be very close. I think it'll be like 24-10.
24-10 Rams?
Yeah, and that hurts.
All right, we got
coming
a loss.
out of my throat.
Wow. I don't even know how to follow that. I think the Zimmer confuse a cat defense will confuse a Goff, and I think they will. He will have a little bit trouble, even picking things up pre-snap and figuring things out, and he will make some of these rush decisions. And Luke said he was overwhelmed last year. I mean, some of that will creep in, and I think that Shermer will call another great game. I mean, there was talk about this week him throwing the unbalanced line out there, and him, there was 5 touchdowns from 5 different players last week, which was really interesting. And I like the way they're calling the schemes on both sides of the ball. So I think it's going to be a good game. I think the Vikings have a home field advantage in one of the few remaining in this half of the schedule, so the crowd is going to be pumped. The team is going to be fired up to play, and they're going to let it all hang out. And it's going to be a good game, but I think the Vikings are a little more experienced on defense and a little better, and they're going to end up with a 24-20 victory.
Ooh, close one. All right, I kind of already tipped my hand, but I do think that the Vikings are going to be able to win this game. I agree with a lot of the stuff you just said, Oberly. I think the veteran experience is going to help in terms of coaching. I think, Mike Zimmer's just been a coach for longer. Sean McVay's in his first year, and he's young, as well as he's been doing. I think that gives us an advantage. We have home field advantage. We have the advantage of having the exact perfect kind of defense. Forgetting quality, just the way we go about things is the exact kind of thing that Jared Goff struggles with. So I'm going to pull. I'm going to call a Vikings win, and I think that Jared Goff is going to have his worst game of the season so far. And as a measure for that, I have chosen adjusted net yards per attempt, which is a pretty good overall metric of quarterback play that includes sacks, and it's basically yards per attempt, but it counts like a touchdown is 20 yards and an interception is minus 45 or something like that. So, and then it's adjusted to make sense in a yards per attempt context. So I think Jared Goff's going to have his worst game of the season. I think the Vikes are going to win, and I think we're going to come away happy.
And I would not be mad at that one bit. That would be amazing. And I know that you guys don't particularly care about this, and the team doesn't, and it doesn't really matter, but it would be nice to get some national coverage. I think, the consensus power rankings for the Rams is, top 3, top 4.
We're, right behind them. We're, 5 or 6 or something. Usually.
Yeah, the ones I looked at where we were, the last 7th or 8th, which I guess, if they look at a team with a backup quarterback playing against some of these other teams, especially in the NFC, but the Eagles, the Rams, they both have really young quarterbacks, so that's gonna come back to hurt them at some point, just like you guys just said.
Zimmer loves to fly under the radar, though, Joe. He would not want you to be promoting their prowess out there. So,
well, luckily for him, I picked a loss, so I'll send that over bulletin board material. With that, though, we're pretty much through tonight's topics. Did you guys have any articles or things you wanted to plug or promote in front of our listeners?
Pocket protectors this week. We talked about offensive line, talked about how to build one. We talked about who's the most valuable between left tackle versus center versus right tackle and stuff.
Where can they find it?
You can find it at climbingthepocket.com. You can also subscribe to Climbing the Pocket on your podcast app, and you will get them in your inbox.
I was thinking of writing a story about Adam Thielen because nobody else is, but I'm just kidding.
I thought of what you said.
Talk about how he's underrated.
Well, I thought about what you said last week, Joe, when the announcers, he made a catch, and the announcers brought up his Cinderella story, and then they said, well, we really shouldn't bring that up anymore because he's, a bona fide player, and we don't need to keep bringing up the fact that he was, undrafted and everything. That reminded me of what you said last week in regards to sort of his story and how people, myself included, keep bringing that up.
There was a Monday Morning Quarterback video of 2 PFF guys talking about how it's time to stop calling Diggs and Thielen underrated and time to start calling them the best duo in the league, and it's not close, which right. I'm glad they caught up.
Yes, I did. I mean, I saw that story too, and I said, Luke had this weeks ago.
I had this week 4, man.
Yeah.
Welcome to my bandwagon.
And now,
The top wide receiver duo?
Yeah, because I think I wrote that Diggs and Thielen were the best wide receivers in the league after week 4. And now people are finally catching up, and nobody's gotten close. I mean, you could, I guess, call Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster are pretty good, but I don't think that they overall. I mean, we got 2 top 10 receivers. It's amazing.
Did he link your story? What the hell? If Thielen is, I heard him on talking with Rich Eisen this week during Super Bowl week. They're going ice fishing somewhere, and
that's good.
Rich Eisen and Thielen.
Yes. So
that's good, but he might miss practice.
Well, that's what they were talking about. And Thielen said, whether if I'm playing or not, we'll make it happen. So.
Ooh, that's spicy. And this the game coming up this Sunday should be a pretty good indicator of how good the Vikings are. And a future playoff matchup potentially. So it's a huge game, as big as the game can be.
Joe, if the Vikings can win this week, I'm not going to say they're going to put them away, but the Rams have a very difficult second half schedule too, and if the Vikings, they really have to win this game to set themselves up as going forward. I mean, each one of these games is going to have that kind of importance on it, but this one is especially huge, and you can get a tiebreaker for him, and I think the Rams will have. If they lose this week when they're playing their first really tough game in a while, I think it might send them not into a tailspin, but it's going to send them in the wrong direction for a little while. So
if we win this week and then lose in Ford Field, we could very well end up competing with the Rams for a wild card spot.
Oh my God!
Well, the only way we lose the division is losing in Ford Field, and the only way that this positioning is really relevant is if we're vying for a wild card spot instead of. Seeding does matter because eventually it might mean like home field or whatever, but
right.
Mostly I'm worried about the teams that we would be competing in a potential wild card situation. And if we win this game and the Seahawks are able to come back and overtake the Rams and take the division back, then this very well could end up being a tiebreaker for a wild card spot.
There it is, balance by Luke Braun. Balance.
I run into a Packers fan a few times a week, and he was all giddy this morning saying that Rodgers has already taken snaps and he's going to be back in a couple weeks and the Packers can still win the division. And I'm like, ugh, get out of here.
You can't legally come back for like 4 more games. Brett Hundley still has to go like 2-2 in that stretch, and that's not easy.
Apparently he's the future. Huge stud. That's the
they
word out of the street.
It's like touchdown pass. That's what they're calling it. It's like Aaron Rodgers. It worked in Green Bay.
But yeah, I wanted to remind everyone to follow us on Facebook and Twitter at purplePTSD and at Vikings Territory, or Viking Territory without the plural on Twitter. And check in with us next week where hopefully I'll be wrong and the Vikings will be 8-2. But this has been the Purple Journal podcast. Thanks for listening, and Skol.